You want me to talk? Here is the family Bible, which is the foundation for or the main source of our background for our family search. And it is the Holy Bible of Charles Lawrence and Annie Witherford Lawrence. And also in it is the original centerfold of the James Lawrence Bible. We don't have the Bible itself, but you will see it starts out with James Lawrence, a native of Ireland, Kings County, town of Shin. Date of birth, the 28th of October, 1793. Emigrated to Canada in 1819 and married to Sarah Howe in the year of 1827, a native of the United States, born in Winchester, December 1802. Okay, do you want to go ahead, Chuck, and maybe just you did a bit of background on the Bible and the family, but introduction as to who we are. Well, I'm Charles Lawrence, the middle son of Gordon and Helen Lawrence, and born in 1933. I'm now 77 years of age, and along with Jim, our interests have been aroused in tracing our family history, and we have a number of records which we're putting together. We're starting basically with the Holy Bible of Charles and Annie Lawrence and the family tree of James Lawrence and Sarah Howe, who, as Jim come here, emigrated from Ireland and ended up settling in the Niagara Peninsula. And from there, Jim? Well, it's our understanding, and most of this was passed on to us from our grandfather, George Lawrence, that when the original Jim Lawrence emigrated from Shinrone, Ireland, which is a little village, or was then in the very middle of the country of Ireland, he came to the Niagara Peninsula and worked digging the Welland Canal, which was all dug. The native labor was Irish labor, and it was hand dug from about 1828 to from 1828 to 1834. Now they resided there, and he married and resided there, as Charles did with a lead-in, and lived right at it. I mean, if you go down to that area and look at the museum, they actually lived in just holes they dug into the side of the canal there and lined them with the shavings off the trees that they cut for planking. So they were there until, my told me they were there till about 1835. And then he and his wife, Sarah, and their first daughter, Pamelia, moved from the Niagara Peninsula, the Pelham area it was called, to King Road, Bathurst area north of Toronto, and settled on a plot of land there around 1835 in the southwest corner of that intersection. Which the deed was in their name. Yes, and that I have done. Glennis and I went to the library in, what was it, in Newmarket, wasn't it, Glennis?
King City.
Or King City. And we actually have the documents. He could read and write. He signed the documents. I think, Chuck, there was something like 240 acres, and they only paid like in the hundreds of dollars for the land then. But when I was researching the people that come from Ireland at that time, most of them were Protestant, and most of them had some money. Even though he may have lived that way on the canal, he must have had some funds in order to acquire land. Yeah, sure. And wouldn't have made all that money there. Well, of course, her family could have had some money too, I suppose, at some point in time. The Howe family. The Howe family, yes, from that. They would have been Empire loyalists. They could have brought their inheritance or the goods up here, put them in no? But we were at a dead end with her, aren't we?
I don't believe they were Empire loyalists.
Well,
my theory is, and of course the brothers disagree, that they were in the Massachusetts area where she was a native of, because there was a large population of Irish digging a canal there. And in the history that I've read, after they left that area, they came up and won both the Erie Canal and the Welland Canal, the Irish. So I don't believe they were United Empire loyalists. I believe that they worked on the canal. That's my theory.
We haven't been able to find any background in Winchester.
No, I've looked now. Every year they're adding more databases and more information.
But there's been no trace of Howes in that town.
But
That's an
I'm
old
sure,
town.
I'm sure that she,
Yeah, it's a suburb of Boston.
I am sure she was born there, because otherwise it would have said not native, but that she was Irish. But I believe her parents were Irish. There was
Yeah.
there's a large population of Hows in and around the Shinrone and Dublin area in Ireland. That's my
There's a
theory.
connection someplace, we just haven't been able to. Which we will.
Yeah.
Eventually, we hope to. Well, anyway, going on from them, the Charles. Well, the rest of the children, Charles and so on, were born in that area, up in King City. There are 2 boys buried in the old Wesleyan churchyard on the northeast corner of Bathurst and King. The tombstones were still, Linus and I were there a few years ago. They died within days of each other in 1844, so it would have been some kind of an epidemic. Diphtheria, scarlet diphtheria or fever, something like that.
that.
Then they, for some reason or other, and Chuck, maybe you know more about it here than I do, but for some other, when our grandfather George Lawrence was born in 1868, 2 years later they pulled up stakes and moved to the Blenheim area. And from there, you know more about it than I do. Well, they lived here. And I might say that all these people we've talked about, even back to James and Sarah, are buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Blenheim. So they all came as a family. They all came here. And the farm they bought, the original farm they bought, on the 3rd concession of Harwich Township, south of what was then Highway, or the Talbot Trail, then became Highway 3. And James Lawrence's son, James, inherited the farm, and Charles Lawrence, married to Annie Witherford, they moved to the Witherford farm, which was north of the town of Blenheim. And from there, the family lived until 1991, wasn't it? Yeah. And when our dad was maybe 20 years old. Yeah. And after that, George Lawrence, who by then had inherited the farm, or had purchased the farm, I think probably around 1903, somewhere in there, Charles and Annie moved into Blenheim, into a brick home, which is still standing here, in its original form yet, in excellent condition. Beautiful home, isn't it? And George took the farm over, and he farmed it, he and his wife Ida Lawrence, until 1921. They sold it and moved south on the communication road to a 120-acre farm, better land, near Rondo Bay. And that remained in the Lawrence family, passing on to their son Jim, until he sold it in 1965. Yeah, 67, somewhere in there, yeah, centennial year. Yeah. And I guess that brings us up to date. Our dad, Gordon and Helen Lawrence, bought property just south of Blenheim, a farm, and basically that's where Jim and I and my brother Bill were raised.
Mention a little bit about Charles and Annie's sons, who were pioneers or homesteaded out west, and especially Jim and Harry. The hanging on the wall behind Jim and Charles is actually a moose hide, which they'll just explain a little bit about.
You better feel that one. Sure, it's your moose hide. Jim Lawrence was born, I think, in 1870. I think he was 2 years younger than Grandpa Lawrence, George, who was the eldest. And in 1898, he, or in that area, in that approximate time, he and a neighbor, John Steve, and a Robertson fellow from Blenheim, along with some other men from Chatham, went west to Calgary, and with the intent of going to the Yukon Gold Rush. And they outfitted Calgary. We have pictures of them there. And they went to the Yukon. Now, I'm not sure. I think Jim made it. We know Jim made it to the Yukon. John Stevens went south to California, and Jim was fortunate enough to discover gold. along with a Scandinavian.
Yeah,
No.
the story I had heard from that, and I got the original gold chunk that he found, was that he and a Swede partnered up. They filed a claim, and this Jim Lawrence, which is Charles and I's great uncle, Jim Lawrence, he actually picked up off the ground a gold nugget much in the shape of an elephant's head. It's an ounce of gold. I had it assessed maybe 6 months ago, and it's worth about $1,000. Anyway, they laid claim, or they filed this claim. Now they sold it a very short period of time,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking the story was they got $200,000 for it, $100,000 each.
I don't know what they got for it, but I know the thing was, if you didn't sell it, you probably were going to end up dead. And they took their money and left.
And gold chunk still, my son James has that gold chunk now. It was to be passed down to, it had been to each Jim Lawrence. Now whether they have children named James, I don't know, but the gold chunk is there.
Could we just take a closer look at the hide?
Yeah.
Yep, I'll move out of the way.
Now, do you know anything about the making of it? Who is this?
The artist is an Indian woman, and her name is Enka Laverne.
A French name?
Well, it's a French name, but she was done by an Indian woman, and it was done in, Uncle Fred wrote the date it was done. It was 1905 that was done.
And did she use like embers, didn't
That
she?
was all burnt in. But
So that wasn't
whole
their
scene-
cabin or anything. It was just a
that
scene
was
she
a
made.
representative of his cabin, and here is the mine shaft that she's got in there.
Where they went down in, yeah.
That represents where they lived, and the moose, of course, is the victim of it, the hide.
Now, the poem, I don't know if this will be visible,
Pull on that
but
side
would
of it.
someone,
Well, Charles can read it.
Charles, would you
No
read it?
sound breaks the silence, though ever so slight, and the shaft is as dark as the sables of night. The candles are gone with the hopes that are dead. The claim is abandoned, the toilers are fled.
Yeah. Right. The only thing I wanted to add about this moose hide. Now, Chuck, did you not say there was 2 of these made?
Uncle Fred saw one in California.
Similar or
Similar, not the exact
Not the
duplicate,
exact same.
no.
Okay, I thought maybe they'd made 2
No.
of them. Maybe one for each partner and so
No.
on, and one ended up down
That's
there.
the only other one you've seen.
Be closer, Charlie.
Okay, well,
You're
anyway,
reading the
so you
wrong
gotta
way.
get
I've
close,
gotta
Chuck.
get close to
Anyway,
you. Thank you.
that being said, now you wanted to know more about the proper names of the relatives. And stuff, so I'll
Well,
let
let's
Charles
talk a
handle
little
that.
bit about Charles and Anne's children and their proper names. Just give a quick
Well,
synopsis.
That's
Okay,
right
well,
here.
we'll take it right out of the births. Edwin Lawrence, born in Vaughan in August 4th, 1868. James Burroughs Lawrence, born November 13th, 1870 in Blenheim. Charles William Lawrence, born in June 10th, 1872, and he died in 1876, wasn't it, Jim? Yep, right
Yeah,
there.
Right there.
1876.
He was young.
And then Annie Elizabeth Lawrence, we always knew her as Black Lizzie. She was born in 1875 in Blenheim. Aunt Mary Ella Lawrence, born in 1878. And Bingham Witherford Lawrence, that was Fred, wasn't it? Born in 1880 in Blenheim. And Francis Ernest Lawrence, born in 1883 in Blenheim.
Which would be Frank.
And Charles Henry Lawrence, Uncle Harry as we knew him,
Yeah.
born in 1885. He was the youngest, of course. So he'd only been 15 years old when our father Gordon was born.
Yeah. And he was the only one that actually went to the States. The rest stayed in Canada, right?
Okay, would you
Yeah.
talk a bit about
Those boys?
the boys?
Well, Uncle Fred, as we knew, Bingham Witherford Lawrence, went to Alberta in 1898. He'd have been 18 years old to work on a cattle ranch,
That's right, yeah.
a large cattle operation, and he was there for some time. And then Frank joined him, and they went out in Calgary, and they put together homesteading gear to journey east to Saskatchewan, and they
Unity
settled in
area.
the Unity, Saskatchewan area in 1905. And they homesteaded there. But it's worth noting that during their trip to Unity, with team and their wagon and so on, they were held up, and the team was taken from them, and some of their worldly goods.
At Rosebud Lake.
And Frank stayed with what was left of their gear and walked back to Alberta
To Calgary, yeah.
and bought a team of oxen and returned some weeks later. And from there they gathered their gear together and carried on to their eventual homestead in Unity. And that's all explained in a speech that Frank gave in 1955, which was the 50th anniversary of the formation of Unity.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And they wintered in a sod hut, didn't they, Jim?
Yeah, soddies. I remember Fred
Yeah.
saying they'd get up in the morning in the winter and the sheets would be frozen to the dirt soddy, and they'd light a fire to get so that they get them pliable and dry them out for the next night. So they lived in those things until they could build a reasonable dwelling. So,
Those people that were out there went through some terrible winters.
yeah,
And that first one or two, well, Charlie and Annie had never heard from them for some months until a letter finally arrived that they were still. And then, of course, they were followed by their sisters, Mary, and she married a man named Mac McLeod. They eventually ended up in Detroit, and that's where they lived and he worked, so they're buried over there. And Elizabeth married, what was her first husband's name? Morris.
I didn't know she was married more than once.
Oh yes,
Was she?
wasn't enough for her. She was married to him, left him, divorced him,
Black Lizzie.
and married a retired Navy captain. Timaeus was his name, and
Oh, that's right, yeah.
they lived in Arizona
Phoenix, Arizona area.
most of
isn't
their
it?
time. She was a great girl though. She traveled a lot, and he went with her because we have pictures lived with Uncle Jim out in BC at his large holdings he had out there, just right along the water. And then, of course, there was the baby Frank. We've already talked about Frank going with Fred out west. And Harry, the youngest, went to the States as well and got into construction and had the H.C. Lawrence Construction Company. He done a lot of development in North Carolina, in the Kitty Hawk area, and particularly on the Outer Banks.
Built bridges, didn't he?
And he ran with the rich. He ran with the Reynolds Tobacco people and these, and made money and lost money. That was the way he wanted it.
He was just up here the one time, I remember, eh?
He come up, well, all three boys were
Yeah.
up. The four of them were together about in
Let's say 53,
1950
54?
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
53 or 54.
And anyway, he was quite an adventurous. They were all pretty adventurous, and as we go through these papers, I am surprised at how much these people moved around
Yeah,
in a narrow with no airplanes, no highways, but they traveled.
Yeah, no decent highways anyway in those days.
And that's pretty well takes us up now to
Well,
where we
yeah.
are.
And today, date today is November the 12th, 2010. We thought we better do this. We get to an age where we can't remember half the things. Getting there now, Joe.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, we want to. All right. Well, our grandfather George Lawrence and his wife Ida, her maiden name was Wright, as my brother had the farm on the communication road, likely no more than 1.5 miles or 2 miles from the little town of Shrewsbury. And it was located on the west side, as Chuck said, 120-acre farm. Our father and Gordon Lawrence, and my mother's maiden name was Helen Irene Smith. And her family came from the Cedar Springs area, and her father was a fruit grower, farmer in that area. Now they bought the farm just 1/2 mile south of where we are now in Charles, 1/2 mile south of Blenheim on the east side. My brother Chuck, our older brother Bill, who isn't here today, but we were all raised on that farm for all intent and purpose. Did our growing up there, and around 1954, my mother started to take home movies. And what you're going to see in a few minutes is about an hour and 20 minutes of compilation of old films that I put together, transferred to a VHS. Now we put them on a disc or DVD, and did voiceover because there was no sound on these. But these are movies that really center around our family from the time we were young, and especially Chuck and Joan and their children, Chris and Don and Kathy and Andrew and Ann growing up. There's some Christmases in there, lots of Christmases, a lot of racing, because that's what our father really did for a living. He trained and drove in the horse business, and then Charles sort of took that business over when Dad retired, and is still at it.
How
still
did
has brood mares and colts and races.
How did your father get it started horse business?
No, well, he always had an interest in horses, and he come by that naturally because the boys that went west, Fred and Frank, were into heavy horses, and they showed a lot of their Clydesdale horses out west. Of course, the Wrights, on the other side, Dad's mother, the Wrights were big into horses too. So his natural interest in animals would be coming from there, but he loved the race horses, and he bought a mare that he raced, drove her to Chatham in a four-wheel wagon and drug a racing cart behind him. And raced that mare over there as a boy, a young man, I suppose, in his teens, early 20s.
Yeah, it was really
And her name escapes me.
Sadie Brigade.
Sadie Brigade.
Yeah.
I don't know how much money he made or didn't make with her, but anyway, that started it. And then he and Jim, his brother, bought a well-bred mare, a young mare who was kicked in the jaw and went blind as a yearling. And that was the foundation mare. Her name was Miss Grattan Mars, and from that, all of our horses that we have owned through the years, and even what I own today, go back to that mare. And a succession of years of breeding to better stallions, of course, has improved the lines of the horses to the point now that one of her offspring was raced well and won a lot of money, and he brought her to Ireland and is standing stud over there. So we continue on with this.
And what was the name of that
That horse,
that horse?
Judge Cam was his name. And he won close to $700,000 racing career. And we have this picture on the rec room wall there, Glennis, if you want to.
The moment I'm going to walk over and take a picture of him. There he.
Now was that when he took a record, Charles, or was that a...
That was a win in an overnight event at Woodbine in Toronto. God, he was a great going horse. He was the best.
And the sign underneath is from his name at the Confederation Cup, which was really a premier race for the top 3-year-olds in Canada, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's good. You still running?
Yes, but
Okay, well-
we can edit this out.
Yeah.
I'd like you to mention a little bit about some of the other. Just a minute. What other outstanding horses do you
Dad have?
come to mind?
And Mr. Bohan.
Well, you know, you go back to Dad, you said, how did he get involved in it? Well, after they bought that broodmare, Dad, in the firstborn was Larry Grattan, and he was born the same year as I was, 1933. Dad sold him as a 2-year-old, had him broken train and sold him as a 2-year-old, and that colt raced well, and they were racing, Dad had sold him, and they were racing him in Wallaceburg, and during the race a newspaper or something blew out on the track in front of him, and he tried to jump it, went down and broke his neck, and he died on the track right there. And the next colt was a horse called Grattan Lee, and here Dad took that horse to Toronto as a 2-year-old to try and set a new track record with a 2-year-old back, and when there wasn't any 401s. That was a long
No
journey.
dual roads, they were just
journey down
numbered,
there,
paved
so-
Yeah.
2-lane highways, yeah.
Dad was always interested in the young colts and trying to get them to the races and
Improved his
make something.
lineage, yeah.
Now,
But
did
yes.
I hear some time back that your father was if he had a specialty, it would be with breaking the young horses and getting them ready for.
Yeah, Dad's horses were always well broke at the track. For the most part, there were very few that were not well-behaved race horses. Because this line of horse is very difficult to, they're very competitive and they're very edgy on the track, for the most part.
They're high strung.
Yeah,
I would say to some extent they are, but anyway, probably Dad's best horse he ever had was Mr. Bohanna. Chosen 3-year-old of the year in Ontario in 1976. We were all there for that.
So he was a 73 foal, wasn't he?
Yep, and Dad had a lot of money. Actually set Mother and Dad up into a very comfortable retirement. And they had a great life with the horses.
There were some other good ones. Tom Jones was a decent horse. Frisco Chief C held the Canadian 3-year-old record for a number of Charles back, and he took that in 58 or 59.
Well, he had Lee Grattenbars that won stakes for them. And
you had Split Image, another good racehorse.
I had a horse called Split Image, another good racehorse that I raced in Michigan, and I raced in Picklands. I raced him down there in New Jersey. So.
But was it Mr. Bohanna that made your father the Horseman of the Year?
Yes,
that one year?
Was.
Yes,
it was, Gladys. He just stood out when it was over here.
Yeah, there was not really no 3-year-old colts in Canada. And Charles, had he had a little luck, he was just as good as the 3-year-olds in the U.S. that year.
Well, Dad took him down to Lexington and raced him down there. Took him to Detroit and raced him.
Yeah, he was in the matron stakes against Pratt and those kind of colts. And
Warm Breeze.
Yeah, Warm Breeze.
Keystone Ore.
Yeah, there's a lot of good 3-year-olds that year. So what you're going to see a lot of horse racing in the film, these home movies that Mother took. And what I did about a week ago, I took these silent films that I had put on a DVD to my son James's place. We've edited them out, took out things that didn't belong. But I did a voiceover on all of these movies. Now, what we're getting is things my mother had written down on the boxes that the films are in. So I've been as accurate as I possibly could, okay? But some of the great things on there, there's our weddings are on there, guys, and horse races, kids growing up. Some pictures of me when I was down in Colorado Springs playing hockey. And anyway, we just wanted you to have a little background on the family to go along with this movie, and we hope you enjoy it. Good. Hi, we're at the Rodney Races 1954. The two ladies there were my Aunt Ann and my mother. This is my dad. I think he was a special judge or had a guest judge for the day. But anyway, he was racing a mare called Rosalie Richards. That's my Aunt Ann, my dad, my Uncle Jim, and Herb Craig. That's Dad and Herb Craig and Uncle Jim there. And this is Art Palmer, a friend of my dad's, and a horse called King Flyer. Art lived in Blenheim, had a little barn up there, would hitch his horse and bring it down each morning. That's Dad getting ready to do some training, and this is, I guess, the Rodney Races here. So we'll take a look. That's my dad going by, and the start of the race. It looks to me like he's got the 3-hole leaving pretty good. And into the first turn. Mother, there's a lot of horse pictures in this. These pictures run anywhere from 1954 to 74. This happens to be the Rodney Races in 1954, and as I said, the horse is Rosalie Richards. Looks like he wins the first trip, but we'll have to see what happens in the second one here. Start of the second heat. The winner always had the rail. Looks like he gets off maybe in the 2 or 3 hole. And at the half, it looks like he's neatly tucked in, still in the number 3 position. But at the finish, just a little short there. Anyway, that's myself walking Rosalie Richards, and after the race, an hour cool down, my aunt and uncle. Now this is my brother Chuck and sister-in-law Joan's wedding in London. Was at an Anglican church, I think on the University of Western Ontario campus because Joni's minister, Reverend Henderson, had been transferred there from Blenheim, and she wanted him to marry them. So this is a group of people, and the camera moving a little fast, but that's Joni's uncle. That's my brother Chuck and Joan. My mother showering them with confetti, and my uncle John, Dad in the background. A happy couple. And there's the group. That's Joni's dad on the end and mother. This is the younger section, myself, Chuck, Joan, Alec, and my brother Bill. And I guess they're making plans for whatever. Night out. There's Murray and Louie, Eden, John, Chuck and Joan, Anne. This was a picture my brother took from the top of the tower, looking down on the group. And a pensive moment between the two dads. Yeah, my brother Bill. And there's Dad talking to Aunt Ann. Oh, kind of a romantic touch. There's Reverend Henderson on the right and Joni's dad, her uncle. And just getting ready, I guess, to wrap up the ceremonies. This is the farm track. And Ann and Vern obviously there with the red Lincoln. That's Chuck with one of the Colts. Around the flower bed on the backyard at the farm in Blenheim. And that's Dad, same Colt. I don't know. It doesn't really say who it is, but there were so many of them. It's Joni sitting on the flower garden with a cat. And Dad again with a Colt. And there's Chuck thinking he can whip me. I guess likely then he could. He just doesn't seem to want to quit either. He always wanted a piece of me. Anyway, this is some of the horses in the barnyard. And sort of a group photo with the dog, Skeeter and Bill. Great hunting dog. That dog was a pointer, English pointer. Man, could she ever hunt. And there's Christine at 3 weeks. Home with her mom and dad. Oh, she's a cute little thing. Anyway, that's kind of a close-up of her. She didn't look very happy for some reason or other. But I'm not sure why they got her in all those blankets when everybody else is in t-shirts. There you go. Uncle Bill with Christine. A little kiss for good luck. There's Grandma. Now this is combining oats in 55. That's Chuck shoveling them off one of the Army surplus wagons, I guess, that Thompson had. And this is, I think Barney Toll was doing the combining. I'm not sure. That was his wife standing there. But he'd pull up, dump all the oats into that wagon, and then they were shoveled off and into the barn, into the individual granary bins in the barn. And that's me carrying a pail of water to the old implement shed. Apparently I wasn't too happy about something that day. And that's one of the boys, Toll boys, I think. And Bill doing a little cleanup around the auger. Yeah, that's Chuck and Bill there. Tell you that chaff gets on you, you're sweating, and it would get on you, it would just really irritate you. Mother's flower garden in the backyard, and Dad walking one of the horses around. That could be Pauline Volo, I'm not sure. Now look at the little dog that was Bill's pup, a black lab pup. We always had a lot of black labs on the farm, and either male or female. More flowers, pictures of the garden. There's Dad with some of the brood mares and out in the pasture field at the front. That's Bill Stewart and I at Ridgetown Fair. Now this is Dad with Pauline Volo. That's who that is there. This is a super test in Ridgetown in 1955. Little post parade. And that's Chuck walking the filly after the race, and Dad. And I think a shot coming up here. Those are heavy teams. That's Retta Smith, a friend of my mother's, and that's my Uncle Chuck. And that's Mom and Dad with the horse in Ridgetown. And Uncle Chuck again. I guess he just realized he was on camera. Well, it's Dad again. I guess that's Pauline Volo again, I think. And coming back after one of the trips, looks like he won a trip, but I don't think he won the trophy. Now this is a super test in Dresden with this is Christine Bird. That's Lauren Johnson. I think he ended up winning that trophy, and but Dad finished second to him that day. It's Bill Stewart walking the mare there after the races. And Chuck with a pail of water. It's my dad, my Aunt Edith, and Aunt Ann, Rose, Ramesh, Edith, and Dad. And there's Great Jim, my Uncle Jim, figuring out his 20s. That's Dad with Lauren Johnson, the guy that won the trophy that day. And that's Chuck and Dad and myself. And that's my Uncle Chuck and Uncle John. And Uncle Jim counting his money. Now this is in London. Track with the stables along the back. It says Pauline Volo, I think, London for charity. Starting gate following them around, at least at the start of it. And the finish. Looks like Dad was fourth. Now this is Joni. Chris at 3 months, it says. Again, this is at the farm. I think this is at Joan's mom and dad's uptown in Blenheim. But that's Chris at 3 months. That's Dad, Chuck with Christine, Grandma Lawrence with Chris, and Grandpa Lawrence with Chris. She looks pretty alert and anxious to see what's going on around her. That's Bill and I. And that's the dog, Duke, I think that was a male. He's wrestling with a cat. Kind of tough on those cats. Now this is hunting. We did a lot of hunting in the fall. His dad with Dode Green, he was a local vet and a good friend. That's some of the results of hunting there, a lot of geese. And we'd go out on to Rondo Bay or down the Shrewsbury area and hunt. That's Jack Huffman, Dad, Uncle Chuck, Bill. Didn't do much hunting, but a friend of my Uncle John's from Hamilton, and looks like Bob Huffman in the background. But a pretty good day's work for hunting in those days. There's the dog. He was a little young to go at that point in time. Good day's work. Pheasants as well, so we'd also shot pheasants as well as the geese. And they take all those and have a big dinner down at Shrewsbury at a restaurant. Okay, this is down at the farm, Christine and the dog. I think this is 19, I'm not sure year. It was 57 or 56. 57. Anyway, Mom, Dad, Christine, and people in the background, and there's Uncle Bill, myself, with Chris, Joni, and Charles. The dog. Chris always liked the dogs. Were great with the kids. They always were pretty attentive and protective of the kids, even ours when they got older. And looks like she's well mobile there, just getting started. There's Grandma running the house. Now this is Frisco Chief C. One of Dad's better colts, Joni Herbert. In 1956, Chuck with the dog, Dad with the dog. Sitting out in the back of a great place to spend Sundays. A lot of family get-togethers at our farm on Sunday afternoons. And that's Joni Herbert and Frisco Chief C. That's a colt that you'll see a little later in these pictures that was one of the better horses in Canada in 1958 and 59. And my dad sold him as a 2-year-old, I think, for $8,500. And he went on to hold a Canadian 3-year-old record for a number of years. This is out at the farm. This is with Chris again and the dog, Joan and Chuck. And Chris there. Got a little flower stand to steady her, but she's getting pretty good on her feet. Yeah. She truly is. Not all that steady, but not bad. Got the dog. How the dog would lick her face, and she just loved that. There's her mother. Now she's not going to be too pleased here that we're taking her picture, but anyway, that's Mom didn't like to get in the picture when she wasn't all spiffed up. There's Dad with Christine again, and Chuck. Mother would have taken all these pictures, or most of them, I think, with the old Brownie movie camera. I know this technology will sound strange to those people watching this years down the road, but that was state of the art back in those days. Okay, this is Donnie's christening in Blenheim. That's Alexandra, Bill, and I. I think we were godparents to Donnie, the three of us. And this was up at Chuck and Joan's place in Blenheim on the main street. There's Chris. She's going to give him a little kiss here. Maybe more than one, but this is Joni's mother and dad with Don and Christine. Helen and Don Gall. It's Dad with Donnie. And Joni's aunt with Chris. And Grandma Lawrence with Donnie and Christine in the front. Yeah, there's Uncle Jim and Aunt Alexandra going down the stairs with Chris. And the rest of the people, that's the McDougals and Murray and Peter and yeah, Uncle Jim, Great Jim with Joni and the kids. And there's Jim and Charles, I, Dad, Bill and Uncle Chuck. And that's the minister at the time of Joni's church. And their family, his wife and their family, who would have been there for the after christening ceremonies. Okay, back to the horses. Grandpa would always take the kids for a ride, and they loved that stuff. They truly did. And that's Judy Chief that he's got there. You can tell by the brace bandages on the front. And there's Donnie and Chris on the cart with Dad. Now they would just, as all the kids did, they just really enjoyed that. Now there they are on the blanket with the cat and the kittens at the farm. Joni with Don. There's Great Jim, my Uncle Jim and my Aunt Ann, the kids. On the backyard at the farm. There's Joni. And I'm not saying anything. Jim wants to say something. I don't know. Too bad they didn't have sound in those days, but they didn't. It was kind of old technology, I guess, with what goes on later. Anyway, Chris is moving pretty well there. And Grandpa with the kids again. I think this might have been Strathroy. Petrolia, one of the others dead, I think, with Janet Chief. There's Mom with the kids at the farm. Don's just getting around now. He's learning to walk, and there's Dad and I with Donnie out at the back of the farm. Hey Don, give us a big wave now. A man of few words. And there's Christine, I think, in the flower garden at Grandma's. And Mom and Dad with, or Joni and Chuck with Dad and the two kids. I think that could be even close to the birthdays for Chris and Charles. I think this is Strathroy with Frisco Chief C and Judy Chief. I know they Oh, there's Uncle Jim with one of the friends of the family and Dad. There's Mom with, I don't know that lady's name, but maybe I should have. Post parade for the races, and oh, that's Dad there. Oh, looks like he might have finished second. No, this is Dad. This is Strathroy. This is what Judy Chief and Frisco Chief see. They're leaving. And they're finishing. Dad there with Judy Chief. He won, I think, both trips that day. Both heats. Yeah. Now this is, I think, the same day. This could be the post parade with Frisco Chief C in it. No, that's Dad again. That's Frisco Chief C with Pete Miller right there winning in Strathroy. I think Dad paraded the horse and Pete drove him. There's Dad again. Gets a cooler, a blanket for winning. And that's Frisco Chief C winning right there. And Pete Miller driving. And Dad sold him right after that race to the Double C stables out of Montreal. And he was one of the best 3-year-olds in Canada the following year. Yeah. There's Dad on the track. Okay, there's Uncle Jim and Dad after the races, I guess, with the and Dad and Pete Miller talking after the races. Dad obviously got a bottle of Coke in his hand. There's Uncle John with Frisco Chief C. Okay. This is Chuck and Chris's birthday party at the backyard. Everybody kind of relaxed and having a good time. Few bubbles. And everybody dressed for the occasion. That's Donnie and Chris. Yeah. There's the trophy, and that's Frisco Chief C. I think these pictures were taken just shortly before they came to pick him up. I think the horse had been sold in, and we're just waiting for the people that bought him to come with a trailer and pick him up. He ended up in Montreal anyway. That's where their stable was out of. Now we're getting ready here to head for Toronto. And that was golly, what was that guy's name from Dresden? Ron, no, that's me on the cockshut tractor with Donnie driving. Likely obviously doing some cultivating that year. There's Chrissy. And there's, now this is my Uncle John and my dad and my Aunt Edith there and my mother. And this is their trip down to Lexington, Kentucky. And they visited a lot of horse farms down there. And looked at the studs and so on at all the big stables. I mean, these were beautiful places. They went to Castleton Farms and Walnut Hall Stock Farms. So this is all horse country. That could be good time. I'm not sure, but one of the more prolific and successful sires in the U.S. Irish Hal, maybe. Let's see. But again, there's just a magnificent place down there to see all those horse farms and how they looked in those days. Horses lived in barns cleaner and better kept than some people's homes, I guess. But they made them a lot of money. This is sort of a very big time for harness racing in North America, and so Dad was right in his own realm when he got down to those places. Now this is my Aunt Mary, and this is the 4 generations. That's my great Aunt Grace with my dad. My great Uncle Fred. This might have been up in Royal Oak, Michigan, when they were up there visiting with Aunt Mary. And there's the whole group there. And there we are. There's that 51 grain Mercury with the trailers. So we were obviously getting ready to ship out someplace. There's Uncle Fred and Frank, Aunt Grace with Mother and Joni, Chuck and Bill. Oh, we would have been going someplace to the races anyway. We're good. Just, it's time to. Anyway, that's it was always a big deal when we were getting ready to go to the races and get started, and people would show up and wish you well and so on. Go ahead. Okay, this is 1958. This is Bill entertaining before what was called the alumni dance. It was graduates of, or people that had gone to the Blenheim High School, and they'd all get together and have a few drinks prior to the dance. So this is at the farm. This is at my home where I grew up, south of Blenheim, on the farm. That's Sally McGregor. Some of these people I do know, some I don't. That's Charles, my brother Chuck, and that's Dad just visiting with one of the younger people there. It's Alec Moore, my cousin's husband. And who else have we got here? This is that's Dad again. Mother, the hostess, I guess, for it. And that's Joyce Moore. That's my cousin Joyce, and that's her husband Alec again. Murray McGregor in the foreground, looks like Bill Burnham in behind. And that's Donnie. And Chris, looks like Christmas maybe 58. And Mother would take pictures of all of the Christmas cards you got. Back in those days, they would get 100 or more, maybe 100 to 150 cards sent. And the tree was always the focal point. That's Glenna's or Joni's sister, Alexandra, with Chris. And some of the things they've got. That's Joni again with Dawn. And Joan's dad with the grandchildren. Say hi, guys. And Joan's mom, Helen Gall. Christmases are always a pretty big deal around in the Lawrence family, and there was a lot of preparation and a lot of work went into Christmases in those days. It was likely one of the major social function of the year. And my mother would spend hours wrapping presents. Okay, this is likely on the way to a Christmas party someplace. Bill with Joni, and likely his date for the night. Charles. And the winter scene on the buffet at the farm never changed year from year. It was always the same Christmas scene set up the same way. And there's those kids looking expectantly, likely on Christmas Eve. Presents haven't been opened, so have a little dance. They would be kind of excited right then. There's Mother with a tree. Dad with a cigar, his trademark cigar. And all the presents. Oh, Chris got something. She got a baby buggy. I see. Okay. And an electric train, obviously, for Dawn. And kind of an animal, an old Massey Ferguson tractor. Let's see if it breaks. Yeah. Guess just helping the kids open their gifts on Christmas morning. Again, this is more Christmas morning stuff. That's obviously at the farm because I remember that carpet. Same outfits, just a different day. No, Don got something to wear. Sure that pleased him. So this is Christmas 1958. Dad and Charles and the kids. Say goodbye, Chris. Oh, that's down at Great Jim's. This is that's my Uncle Jim there. We called him Great Jim because He was a great uncle to the grandkids. That's Mother. That's the McDougals, Judy Kirkwood, my Aunt Ede, and her husband, Uncle John, Joni, Peter McDougall, Louis McDougall, and Murray McDougall. And I think this is, Mother said on the thing, just a little bit of everything that's dead. Obviously, jogging horses in the winter at the farm, kind of a cold, nasty job. Jog 2 at a time if you could, to cut down on your exposure out in the kind of cold weather. But I think these were horses. Dad had a horse called Irish Forbes in those days. Could be him. He also had Judy Chief, and Bill did a little training of a filly called Orphan Annie. So I think that's what you have on the track there. Now this is races, obviously. I'm trying to pick up. It doesn't say where it is on the card, but kind of hard to see, obviously. Now this is Ede and John had been visiting at the farm. They're just on their way home. We're helping them get the trunk packed. It's Mother, who doesn't like to be filmed, and Dad. Now, I was kind of fooling around with him there, so he wasn't too pleased. And Aunt Ede. And that's my good friend Jerry Murdoch. Joan and I and Aunt Ede at the back of the car. And that's another friend of mine, Bill Stewart, with myself and my dad. Lots of people would stop into the farm. There was always visitors there. And there's Don learning how to shovel that stuff, and I guess Don done a lot of that in his life after that. And letting the dogs out of the dog pen. Pointer and a black lab. Skeeter and Lady. And that's Don and Chris doing a little waving, and that again is Joni's dad, Mum. Oh, it's Alexandra, and her mum. Yeah. Just some horses in the paddock area. And that's myself and Jake Murdoch leaving for a night out in the 59 Black Mercury Monterey. Really liked that car. That was one of the better cars in Blenheim at the time. That's Dad with Milt Symington. He was a horse owner, and Dad would train and race his horses. That's my brother Bill, my Uncle Jim, and Milt's son, young Bill Symington. They would come out to visit and see how the horses were getting along and so on. A little bit of the lab playing out in the back. Not sure who the colt is, but be a foal of likely 1958 or 59, right in there. Yeah. Now it's Kathy and Dawn and Chris. I think this is Donnie's 3rd birthday, it says. But that is Kathy, yeah, with her mom and dad, and with myself. The lights on that camera were really bright. I remember you could hardly see when they were shining right on you. But with Jake Murdoch, and that's with Kathy with Uncle Bill. Yeah, Don's a man that day. There he is with some of his presents. Mm-hmm. This is still more of Don's birthday. 3 candles, 3 years old. Ah, there you go. Getting ready to head home. And another Christmas. Helping Grandma put tinfoil on the Christmas tree. It just had to be strung right. Mother put a lot of tinsel on trees. I'm not so sure the kids would get it on the right way, but anyway. She always had a beautiful Christmas tree. Yeah. Well, there's that Christmas scene, same year after year. I wonder where all that stuff is now. And the mirror decorated. Looks like aluminum trees were starting to make their entrance onto the scene at that time. Mother and Dad in the poinsettia. And again, kind of a dearth of gifts around the whole place. The Christmas cards all hung up. Must be Christmas Eve. That's up at Chuck and Jones. That's their little fireplace they had for the kids. So Santa would have a place to come in. And this must be Christmas morning. All the excitement. All the toys. What's he got? Oh, harmonica. Oh, 2 harmonicas. Figure skates for Chris. Hockey stick for Don. And skates. Wow. Look at that, eh? There's Kathy. She's not cluing into much of this right now. Say Merry Christmas, Kathy. Oh, Don says those skates not too easy to walk around on after all. No. Dad and Mother, they're going to open their stuff up. Now this is down at the farm, down at our home. Piano in the background there, and Mom got a ring that year. That's right. I'd give her a diamond ring. Yeah. Watching the movies and watching the kids grow up is quite a thing to see all the changes in them from the time they were born. Now this is down at Great Jim's. This is the table at what was my grandfather Lawrence's place. That's my Aunt Ann. That's myself. Looks like the McDougal family there. It's kind of dark, but that's Dad and Bill and Louie and Jim, Charles and the kids. And Ann, my Aunt Ann really enjoyed these times too. She'd come up and work hard to get that house into shape, get all dressed up, and we'd go down, have another Christmas exchange of gifts and a great big meal, and everybody had a real good time. Great family time. And there's my Aunt Louie with Kathy. Louie McDougal. Oh, Chris got an ironing board. Think there was any stereotyping back there? That's my Uncle Vern. Jim's got an envelope. I think he must think there's money in it. That's Bill. Joni. Oh, Chris got something. There's Ann. There's my mother. Helen Lawrence. And my dad, Gordon. Vern Evans again. Murray McDougal. Peter McDougal. Obviously a little shy, didn't want his picture taken. And that's Alexandra Gall and I think we were like on our way to an alumni dance. That's more alumni pictures. In fact, this is 1959 alumni dance, and these pictures were taken at Bowman's, it says. Now there's Kathy when she was young. I think this is on Rennie Drive in Kitchener. Oh, that's Ann. And that's Andrew and Kathy. That's Patty Cornwell, a neighbor. Yeah, that's Ann. There's, and my Aunt Ede, Velma Cornwell. That's me and my dad, my Uncle John. Donnie. Kathy. Kids again. Andrew Lawrence, yeah. Got Ann. Yeah. Dad. John Kreider. There's Glennis, my wife. Myself. Those are Glennis, or Joni's aunt and cousin. Okay. This looks to me like more pictures taken out on the farm of good dad and the grandkids. That's Joan and Chris and Dad with Ann on his lap. Andrew in the background. That's Christine and I in the front. Now this is Glennis and I's wedding in August 19th, 1967 at Blessed Sacrament Church in Chatham. And Glennis is a Chatham girl. Her dad and mom were from Chatham, Bill and Natalie Wilder. He was with the fire department. That's two of her friends, the Koning sisters, were in the wedding party. My aunts, Hilda and Marguerite, mother's sisters, and Lottie, another sister of my mother's, Lottie Gray. And that's Joe and Donna Pettit, friends. That's Eleanor Story, Eleanor McDougal, and Ona Murdoch. Again, friends of friends I had. That's the wedding party. That's my best man, Gary Goebel, my brother Chuck, Glennis's brother Dale, and my brother Bill. And Elaine Coney was Glennis's maid of honor. Her sister was one of the bridesmaids. That's Guy Pardo, a cousin of my mother's. That's Dad and my brother Bill. Jake Murdoch in the background. He's heading out with my best man Gary and my brother Charles. John Rose, a friend of mine and classmate from Michigan State University. And that's Tony Elliott. Played hockey with me at Michigan State, and his wife Janet. Tony and I both grew up in Blenheim, went to high school, and both played hockey at Michigan State. That's my Uncle Chuck talking to me. And I think we're getting ready to head out. This is the back door at the farm. That door was there for a long time, kind of a signature of the place. It had a harness horse on it and kind of a unique thing. And Mother's window boxes. That was a white Mercury we had then. Dad was a great Mercury guy, mostly Mercury cars. Some of Mother's roses. There's Donnie in amongst the roses. Look like this is interesting, Don. Smell those flowers. This is a duck pond at the farm. Kind of hard to see, but there were just hundreds and hundreds of ducks in there. I guess I hunted more over that pond than anybody else. Shot a lot of ducks out of there. Had a little duck blind in the corner. And nothing better than a wild duck dinner. Maybe improve it by throwing in a wild pheasant, but we'd have just like hundreds to thousands of ducks in that pond a day. Just be black with them. Kind of hard to miss when there was that many around. Yeah. Fall of the year, a lot of corn around. Now this is Dad and Mother went up with John and Eder on their way out west, and somebody hit a moose up around the border of Ontario and Manitoba. And that's what that was. There's a sign with the Arctic Watershed. And these pictures are all taken like on their way to Vancouver. And they traveled a lot. My mother, Dad, Helen, and Gordon Lawrence, and Dad's sister Edith and her husband John Kreider took a lot of trips together. They enjoyed each other's company, and John was as much a member of the family with my dad and his brothers and sisters as you could get. They were just really, really close friends. And John loved to drive. He loved his cars and he loved to drive. So they'd head out. Golly, I know one year they went way down to Mississippi and would travel. They're obviously in the mountains there. They'd take these pictures as they drove along. Mother generally would do all the filming of this stuff on the old Brownie camera. Heading into, I would think into Banff area, it looks like to me. Banff National Park likely went into, this is not exactly sure where that is, but it could be Banff. That's Banff Springs Hotel right there. So pictures previous were likely part of the Banff area, but that's obviously the Banff Springs Hotel. Stayed there a number of times myself, so I'm very familiar with that place. And that could be Mount Rundle, which is right off to the side of the Banff Springs Hotel. Some beautiful scenery through the mountains, and the pictures wouldn't do it justice, but that's kind of reviewing it, just hard to see what that says. I suppose maybe it might be better on a larger screen, but could be Grouse Mountain. Capilano, Grouse Mountain area. And these were mountain sheep heading back into the trees. I remember them saying that there was a lot of them around that area. Kamloops, in the Fraser Canyon. I think this is up at Horseshoe Bay, which is where my great uncle Jim had a hunting and fishing camp. They drove up there when they were in the area. The camp burnt down, I think, in the late 40s, but I'm pretty sure this is where that is taken. There's actually a road up there that goes off of the Sea to Sky Highway called Lawrence Way, named after my great uncle James, and that's my great uncle Fred and great aunt Grace. So that's obviously where they are, because they would have taken them up because Fred and Grace lived there at that hunting camp. So nothing much to see there now, except the area is multi-million-dollar homes all through that area now. You know, private driveways and things like that. It's quite a high-class area, what they call Sunset Beach, Horseshoe Bay area. Yeah. That's overlooking it. That overlooks Horseshoe Bay, Howe Sound. Horseshoe Bay is on Howe Sound. I think this is the apartment building where my great uncle Fred and Aunt Grace lived after they moved into town, into what was called North Vancouver. So they're likely taking pictures of the apartment complex they lived in. Be some great views of the overlooking the water from those balconies. Yeah, they'd be heading out now to drive on their trip. I think they ended up leaving Vancouver area and actually going down through the States to some of the areas there. Waving goodbye. Now that could be, it's in Vancouver at the park there. Stanley Park. Mother and Dad. And again overlooking some of the coastline. Empress Hotel, one of the CP hotels on Vancouver Island. Pretty ritzy place. So I've stayed in it a couple of times on business occasions out there, so it is. And I think that was some royalty that was visiting over there that they got a picture of, not the king or queen, but a cousin or something of Elizabeth's or something that they got a picture of. I guess now that's a swinging bridge. Capilano, I think it is. How they ever got mother out there is beyond me, because she was deathly afraid of heights. But she went out, so speaks volumes. Yeah. Don't look down. Oh, look down. Okay. I wouldn't have bet. I would have bet that you couldn't have gotten her to do that, but she did. It's just more pictures of the coastline. Not sure what that is. Looks like a tower of some kind. Could be the lift. That's a ski lift at Grouse Mountain. That's where that is. Likely pictures taken from the ski lift going up. Yeah. So I guess overhead pictures from a high position. Some of them kind of a little washed out at this point in time, but I guess just more scenery. When you're there and you're taking the pictures, you think the colors are so vivid, they don't always turn out that way. So there they are, just driving, I guess some pictures as they're driving on of the mountains and areas as they head down through the U.S. That looks like a dam of some kind, so it has to be. I'm not sure where it is. The roll didn't say, but it's obviously, it could be the Hoover Dam. I don't know. Doesn't look big enough, but it could be. And snow-covered trees as they drive along. And it's a bear. Brown bear, black bear come out of the woods alongside the road and don't seem to be afraid of anything. I suppose tourists feed them, so they come out and intermix with the cars, and kind of dangerous because some people aren't smart enough to stay in their cars. They'd get out, but anyway. Again, just from what I can make out, these are just pictures they've taken of the scenery as they drove along, thinking it looked so beautiful, I suppose, as they went. Waterfall and the crevices and valleys. That could be the Columbia River, I don't know. Obviously, cut a deep crevasse through the thing anyway, up through the mountains. So they're at some lookout point for something. Obviously pretty high up. Don't know. Now they're out on a glacier, I think, someplace. I remember Dad saying this is some edge of some glacier that's been there for thousands and thousands of years. Anyway, that was a long trip they took, and obviously impressive with the scenery they saw, and going down through all these areas. I know they visited Yellowstone and places like that. So anyway, we got Christmas here. This is Christmas 1968. This is at Glynis and I's home in London. On Adelaide Street, we had an apartment there. This was David's first Christmas. He was just a few days short of being a year old and just learning to walk. And that's him on his way out to see what Santa Claus left him, I guess. He's looks kind of excited. Anyway, he's thinking, I don't know where all this came from, but I'll take a look at it anyway. A wagon, and so there's just the three of us there. That was a telephone, a plastic telephone and things. But yep, that was David's first Christmas. That was December 25th, 1968. Well, it works, Dave. And that's David's cousin Scott Lawrence and his mother Diane and Glynis. And that's the same Christmas, I guess. So we had Bill and Di lived in London then, so they must have come over to visit us and had a little Christmas get together. Table set. There's Bill. Yeah, just the four of us and the two kids. And they weren't all that far apart. They were pretty close in age, David and Scott. This is David's grandma, Wilder. My wife Glynis's mum, Nataline, or Nettie Wilder, and that's her sister Gayleen, and some grandkids. Larry Martin beside his grandma there, and she's holding David. This would have been taken at Glynis's house in Chatham at 30 Currar Drive. And there's her sister-in-law Judy and her brother Joe, and that's my wife Glynis, of course, and that's her brother Dale. And that's her dad with her mom. That's Glynis's dad there, better picture of him, Bill Wilder. And there's David with some of his Christmas presents. Now this is at the farm in Blenheim again. The Christmas out there, and David's got a clown that his brother James thought was bewitched. He used to scare him. And a big red nose. That's Donnie. And that's Grandpa with Ann. Glynis with their son David. The mum, all decked out. And this is David's first birthday, January 1st, 1969, at our apartment on Adelaide Street. One candle, and he's gonna do whatever, I guess try to blow it out. Yeah, put your finger in it, Dave. Okay, gonna cut the cake here. There, blow out the candle and cut the cake. David thought that was all right. Now let's get into this stuff. Oh, geez, I hope that wasn't the sharp side I put in his mouth. That's pretty good stuff. Chocolate cake. I think it gets worse from here. I got this feeling. Well, it looked like the cake was good anyway. That's my wife's cousin and her brother-in-law, Lawrence Martin, her other cousin. The Johnson family, I guess, from Mollisburg. And that's Glennis's grandma, Keller, and her niece, Tracy, brother, Larry. And this is another sister of Nettie's family from Sarnia, the Tales family. Jean and Dave Tales and their girls. That's Glennis's mom again, and with her mom, Glennis's grandmother, Keller. Yeah. She was a very nice lady. Yeah, just more family. Glennis's aunts, I think, there. And that's Glennis's brother, Jim. He came to visit with his girlfriend when we lived in London in the apartment. And his girlfriend had a sister with her, so they both came down to visit. Jim ended up joining the Air Force and moved out to Cold Lake, Alberta. Not long after that picture was taken, or this film was taken. Now it's David again. He's walking pretty well when he was a year. Pretty good. Blenheim Centennial Parade, 1974. Now there's some of the floats you'll see in here have some of Chuck and Joan's kids on them. We'll try to point them out as we go through, but this parade was held in Blenheim, and a number of floats in it, and some of them I recognize, some of them I don't. I'm pretty sure that's no one we know playing the accordion. Old cars. Don't know who these people are, but a lot of obviously sort of antique cars and people with saddle horses and so on. Anything to make up a parade. The cake. 6-horse hitch, heavy horses. Kind of impressive with all the britching on it. Old English double-decker bus. Bunch of clowns. That's Kathy, right there. Kathy Lawrence on the left. And that's likely Kathy Clayton with her. And that's Andrew on the float there, dressed up like an Indian. Yeah. Old threshing machines and steam tractors. Steel wheel tractors, my goodness. Morpeth hockey team. I actually played for that team in community hockey back in the late 50s. And an old hearse. from the late 1800s, likely. And there they are down at the Blenheim Centennial School. Well, that looks like it's getting near the end of this with the parade about over, and looks like an old Ford convertible. Kids dressed up as boxes. Must be somebody we knew waving there. Okay, doing a little voiceover on some old recordings that were taken back in the 50s. That's my Aunt Ann Evans getting in a 1953 or 54 Lincoln. They always drove good cars because her husband, Vern Evans, had a Mercury Lincoln Meteor ship dealer, or a Mercury Lincoln Meteor dealership in Brantford, Ontario. That's my mother with Aunt Ann at the farm in Blenheim. And my dad here with... I think that chestnut filly is a filly called Bonnie Sue Chief. I can't be sure because, you know, we're talking about 60 years ago. But that was the only chestnut filly I ever remember him having was Bonnie Sue Chief. Don't think she turned into much of a racehorse either, but she was good looking. That's myself with the two kids. I don't know who they are, but can't, or at least for sure. And that dog is an English pointer. And I did a lot of hunting with that dog. She was a great bird dog. Again, my dad with one of the brood mares and a small colt at the farm. Not sure who the brood mare is, but I believe at that time the brood mare he had was called Joni Herbert. And that would be one of her offspring. If that's 1955, that foal there could be a horse called Frisco Chief, who turned into actually to be a champion 3-year-old pacing colt for Dad in 1958. Again, just another one of the horses. I don't know who it is. And this is just some footage taken outside the farmhouse looking down number 3 highway. Again, Dad with one of the brood mares, and I'm in the rear bringing up one of the colts, trying to get it to lead with a line. I have to train them when they're young to do that. So and again, me with whoever those young kids were there. As Dad gives it a gentle nudge to get it along. I don't know who that was. And this is just one of the farm cats. She had some kittens. They couldn't have been more than a few days old right there. It looks to me like their eyes are hardly open, so I must have been reasonably proud of them. I guess I wanted to show them to Aunt Ann because she was taking most of this film up. And the cat's going to bail out there. I guess she thought it was safer on the ground than in the basket. Yeah, so that's my Aunt Ann and her husband, Vern Evans. He owned a few racehorses as well. Bought some of them from Dad, actually. And Ann with her fur stole on. She always dressed pretty well. This has got to be spring, in the spring of the year, I would think, likely early April, first part of May. And that's my brother Bill Lawrence in the doorway. Now these pictures here are actually of races in Dresden when my dad was racing in the Super Test race there, and I think Vern, my uncle Vern Evans, had a horse racing as well. These pictures are actually duplicated in the home movie section. There are pictures my mother took on her movie camera. That's myself and a friend, Bill Stewart, sitting on the fence there with us at the races. Bill come over with us that day. He was likely my closest friend when I was that age. And that's my father there, the first horse, and her name was Christine Bird. She had been very sick not long before this race took place, and they raced 2 heats, and Dad won the first one with her. And if he'd have just been very careful with her and nursed her through the second heat, I think she would have finished high enough in the standings to win the trophy. But he wanted to win both heats with her, and she ended up making a break in the second trip and finished back. So a fellow by the name of Lauren Johnson won the trophy. And you'll see that's the first heat there that Dad won, and he's called saluting the judges. Now this here is Uncle Vern's horse, and so my Aunt Ann taking these pictures obviously would have focused on their horse as well. And he was driven by one of the McWilliams boys. They were 2 brothers that trained and drove Vern Evans's horses. Hard to tell sometimes whether they were sober enough to sit on the cart, but he seemed to get the job done sometimes. But they were notorious drinkers. That's a fellow by the name of Lauren Johnson right there, and he ended up winning the Super Test that day. And I think could be Wilbur Apthorpe with one of his horses. And this looks like the introduction for the second trip of Dad's race. That's him there. And that's a presentation of the trophy afterwards to Lauren Johnson. So this was 1955, I believe, that took place. And the fall fairs, places like Dresden were quite popular. That's my brother Charles, my mother with her movie camera that the other pictures were taken on. Close friend Rose Vermeesh, close friend of my mother's. That's my dad with his back to the camera. And it's Mom with her Brownie movie projector. That's my Aunt Ann and Rose Vermeesh. That's my Aunt Edith Kreider, my dad's sister. She was great, she was really a great lady. I used to stay a lot with them. She had 2 daughters, and my cousins Judy and Pat Kreider. Now these pictures here are pictures that my Aunt Ann took down at the original Lawrence farm on the Communication Road south of Blenheim down near Shrewsbury. And they like to take pictures of the flowers, and my uncle had bantam chickens that you see there. You'll see them pecking around the backyard. That's the old hand pump that stood out. Do you remember that, Jim? It was out at the back. And that was at one time a wooden board path, and the boards were so old they just rotted into the ground and grass grew up between them. Now that's a peculiar thing. They used to put duck eggs under chickens, and that's a bantam, and those are baby ducks she's raising.
The chicken was raising the ducks?
Yeah, the chicken will raise the ducks, yeah. Yeah, you put eggs under them. Now that's my Uncle Vern. These pictures may have been taken at his farm near Brantford, because I don't recognize that place with all the trees, and I certainly don't recognize the horses. But he owned or rented, I guess, property is maybe better put. He rented some land around Brantford and kept a couple of colts there, maybe a broodmare or two. But I certainly don't recognize the place, so it wasn't at either farm in Blenheim where these were taken. And now these pictures are really dark here. I don't know who these people are. It's only a few seconds long, but obviously there's some dogs in there, and could be McDougal kids. I'm not sure, but it's so dark I don't recognize them in this. Now coming up, you have some pictures taken at my grandfather's farm that my Uncle Jim. That's my Uncle Jim. He was fondly referred to as Great Jim by my kids and my brother's kids. And he inherited the original George Lawrence farm just on Communication Road up the road from Shrewsbury. And he always had a broodmare. That particular broodmare there is a mare by the name of Gypsy Rose Lee. She was a tremendous producing dam, but didn't race well herself when she was young. And that colt along the side of her could be a colt that he raised called Red Wing, and turned into a real top class racehorse as that colt grew up. One of the better ones he raised. But that farm's all gone now. All those trees, everything were bulldozed down in the late part of the 20th century, 1990s, and it's just open land now. Everything that was there is gone. So. Man, it jumps around a little bit. There's not much we can do about that, but anyway, nice to have the pictures of him and be able to review them. That's the old water tower. Now these pictures here, just to end it up, are pictures taken of my dad and my brother Bill training horses at Dad's place, just south of Blenheim, where he had a very nice half-mile track, and he did all of his own training and preparation of horses for the races there. And that's about it.